Hey guys, welcome to an interesting video of Wild Rift. So today we're back with a Ezreal updated complete guide. Unfortunately, despite the hype over crit Ezreal when it first became a thing when patch 6.2 first came out, unfortunately we're still back with the same build. But before we get into the build, check out what I have in the cards above, which is Ezreal's basic guide for his skills, leveling order tips and tricks, as well as a couple of combos. But with that said, let's get straight into it. So now looking at the top players' builds, you can see basically everybody has a variant of this build, while the third guy has a pretty interesting build, but pretty much the top two guys have a basically variant of this build depending on what you want as your build order, which I will get into real soon. But essentially, the Manamune Triforce build is still the best, most consistent build for Ezreal. Now, we will be covering the crit build in a separate video, but let's talk about what is his best build first. Okay, so first off, we're going to start with the Gluttonous Greaves. For the early AD and the Omni family, you want to rush this first because this gives you your laning power, and you can actually do quite a lot in lane if you play Ezreal well. Right, next up, we're going to go for Manamune. Now, Manamune, of course, gives you a lot of extra mana. Of course, when you evolve it to your Mirror Mana, it gives you extra damage on your abilities as well as your auto attacks, so just very useful in general. Of course, it did get buffed in, I think, in 6.2C, where it now charges even faster. And then, of course, you have Triforce. Triforce, of course, you get the Spellblade passive, which procs on your Q, as well as, of course, your autos in between your auto attacks. And then you get a very nice stat line. Now, a very common thing I like to do is actually, after I go for Boots, I like to go for Tear and then into Sheen. Now, of course, Sheen gives you that Spellblade passive in lane, and that makes you a lot stronger in lane. However, in this game, I don't actually do that because I'm able to afford the entire Manamune at one shot, which is probably the best to go for and not delay it so you can charge it up faster. And then your next three items, or your last three items. Now, these three items can be built in any order. Depends on number one, your preference. Number two, the state of the game and like who your enemies are and what would be the most useful. So I'm gonna go over the strengths of each of them and why you want to build them over the other. But you will build all three of them eventually if you get to full build. But sometimes you might want to build one earlier than the other. So first off, you have Riftmaker. Now, Riftmaker I think is the most Swiss Army knife item out of the three, in the sense that it's just kind of a very good item in general, right? Because it gives you a pretty nice stat line. It gives you Omnivan, which is always going to be useful, and it gives you true damage. Now, true damage is good against both tanks and squishies, alright? Of course, just simply for the fact that against tanks, you'll ignore their defenses, and against squishies, it's just extra damage that's just always going to be good, right? Then you of course have Bork. Now, Bork, the main selling point is of course the current health on hit damage, which is particularly useful when you're into a very tanky team. Now, when you're into a tanky team, I wouldn't recommend playing Ezreal, but sometimes you have like one or two tanky-ish people on the enemy team. This is when going for Bork would be a pretty good idea. And of course, getting more physical vamp and getting more, stats like attack speed is going to be very helpful as well, because Ezreal actually auto attacks a lot despite being a spellcaster. And then finally, you have the Seralda's Grudge. Now, Seralda's Grudge, of course, also is an armor pen item that now gives grievous wounds and, of course, slows. So you might be wondering, when do I go for Blade of the Rune King first, and when do I go for Seralda's Grudge first? Well, basically, Bork is really good against health builders, right? Because not all tanks build health. Now, it's very common to build like Heartsteel and Sunfire Aegis, etc., these kind of health items, but some tanks just build pure defenses, right? Like Frozen Heart or whatnot. I mean, Frozen Heart gives health, but it's not a huge health item, right? So if they build health, you definitely want to go for Bork, right? But if they don't build health, you want to go for Seraldas. Now, another use case of Seraldas is when they're very kiteable. So what do I mean by very kiteable? So for example, if you're playing against tanky champions like Garen or Darius, and they try to run you down, and you slow them with Seraldas, they're never gonna reach you unless they like Flash Ghost and Strike Breaker or something like that. But otherwise, it's really hard for them to reach you. So if you're playing against tanks who don't have dashes, don't have mobility, champions like Set, for example, these kind of low mobility champions, Seraldas needs to be rushed, right? So other than that, of course, for the runes, you actually want to go for Conquer instead of going for PTA. Now, I do love PTA, and I have mentioned in a lot of my videos I prefer PTA over Conquer, but I think in the current state of the game, Conquer is a lot more valuable, because in the mid to late game fights, you're going to stack up Conquer very, very easily, and you are going to be able to, of course, output more damage overall with Conquer, whereas PTA is a lot more useful in lane. Now, I still will eventually do a video on PTA on Ezreal, but I think for now, Conquer is better right? So for the rest of the runes, it's the standard ADC loadout. Now, as I mentioned briefly just now, Alacrity is still going to be pretty good, despite the fact you're not mainly an auto-attacker, because you still auto-attack quite a bit. Now for the spells, normally going to go for Flash or Cleanse. Of course, Ezreal does not need Gold, so Cleanse is the most common option, because normally there's going to be CC on the enemy team. If you really don't need Cleanse, you of course can go for Exhaust or Barrier. But with all that said, now let's move on to talking about the gameplay. Okay, so now we move on to the gameplay. Now this is not going to be a too long gameplay, but of course, as usual, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Any questions, queries, or remarks, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Of course, I will be sure to address them. So I think Ezreal currently is a pretty strong champion. Not really the best, but definitely not the worst either. I actually think he's in the upper tier of champions. I do think he's pretty decent, but of course you need to be able to land your skill shots. I do think he's like an S tier champion, so pretty strong indeed. But of course, yeah, it's very, very skill shot reliant. So you gotta get good at, landing those skill shots. So he's also one of the best blind pick champions because he doesn't really have any bad matchups, right? He's kind of just okay in every matchup. He doesn't have that many great matchups either. So he's kind of just a really good champion to blind pick whenever. Now I like picking Ezreal, into just teams that kind of want to chase me down. I'm not really chase me down because that's like when I pick Xayah, right? But it's kind of like against Blitzcrank, you get that free escape with your E, because you can cancel the hook with your E. Against Amumu, you kind of get a free dash to kind of avoid his bandage, things like that. So I think it's a really good game, for Ezreal. And here against a Senna Blitzcrank, right? So it's a Senna ADC farming Senna, which we haven't seen in a long while, or almost ever, right? So yeah, there I thought Blitzcrank was going to hit me, so I quickly eat backwards, but he actually hooked my minion instead. So my E is on cooldown for a little bit, so I am a little bit vulnerable during that time. However, it should be a-okay. And yeah, so in the meanwhile, we want to, number one, focus on farming, but number two, focus on poking as well. We have Zilean as our support, and Zilean, of course, is an amazing poking champion, but he does get hooked in by Blitzcrank, which is not too good. We are, however, trading back in terms of auto attacks, because obviously we have Conqueror. Auto attacking will stack up the Conqueror as well as our abilities. So we will be doing decent damage, with our auto attacks, just purely with our auto attacks. Of course, we are an AD champion, right? So our auto attacks will still hurt. We hit Blitzcrank in the bush there with our Q, and you want to be using your Q to try to poke the enemies down as far as possible, like so. And if possible, you can hang on to your Conqueror stacks and keep on auto-attacking / Qing them, and then they're going to be taking a lot more damage than what they really wanted, and something like that, right? So here we are able to get our boots, so we're not going to waste any time. We're just going to go for the reset immediately, and we're going to get our boots. So here with those boots, we're going to run straight back to the lane, and they've actually pushed in the entire lane there. Looks like Blitzcrank and Senna are both looking for a reset. Now that's fine. I didn't really want to interrupt the reset because Zilean was quite far behind me, and if I did interrupt the reset, I might be in a 1v2 situation if I get hooked in, so it's a little bit dangerous there, so I didn't do it. Furthermore, I get a very nice wave state, right? You guys saw I was able to actually pull 2 minions and freeze the wave outside of the tower, and as a result, now the wave is frozen outside my tower, and they're gonna have to step up all the way here if they want to take the minions, which also makes it easier for me to auto take them and to land poke. And if my jungler ever comes, which he's not gonna because he's currently almost dying in the top lane, but if he decides to come, it's a pretty easy gank for him with Senna and Blitzcrank having no dashes to get out of Jarvan's Cataclysm. So here we hit level 5 before them, but we don't really have an opportunity to really go in on them, unfortunately, so it's not really going to matter all that much. Now, something else that I kind of have to question is whenever I play with Zilean, is this Zilean actually going to ult me when I get low? Right? Because if I know he is, I could play a lot more aggressive knowing that I have a Zilean ult behind me, right? But I've played with so many Zileans who don't use their ult. They either don't use their ult, or they use their ult only on themselves, or they're just very slow on the trigger with the ulti that I kind of lost faith in Zilean's ulting me already. Don't know if you guys had the same kind of experience, but yeah, as he transports the Senna route to me as well. And here I get the ulti down onto the Senna as well as getting a bit of extra wave clear. Now Amumu is here for a gank, so is Jarvan. It's becoming a 3v3 at this point. Senna is really low. I'm looking to try to kill Senna if I can. Now I managed to E forward Q and barely managed to actually get the kill onto the Senna. And here Morgana is also coming down. It's becoming a very, very messy, kind of long extended skirmish here. Morgana between the towers gets engaged on by Amumu. I'm just trying to push the wave in so we can cross the tower to help, or at least farm plates. Now, blue buff is getting invaded by the Jarvan, and meanwhile myself and Zilean are just free farming the plates, while Jarvan and Morgana are attracting the attention of the enemy team. Lucian comes off the rotation, Amumu goes to respawn as well, and my team are just backing off away from the jungle. Now with that kill and with these plates, I'm very close to having enough gold to complete the entire mana mune. So instead of backing for 2 item components, I'm actually gonna stick around, get that last bit of farm, just enough to get my mana mune, and I'm just gonna recall and pick up that mana mune in question. So as I said, normally I will get tier into the Sheen, but in a situation where I can complete the entire mana mune, I will get the mana mune, because this allows you to charge up the mana mune to the mirror mana really quickly, and this will of course be a pretty major spike for Ezreal. So running straight back to lane, once again I ulti through the wave and I'm able to hit both of them, which gives a good amount of poke, but Senna heals it back with her Q a little bit. Now they're pretty far overextended. Unfortunately Zilean does not get the double bomb, but the Blitzcrank does take a lot of poke from me, because as I said, Ezreal's a pretty good matchup into champions that have pretty low range and just get poked very easily, and Blitzcrank of course is one of those champions. Now here you can see Amumu hovering around the area. Of course we do have a ward there, so we have full information. Both objectives are coming up momentarily, and we're gonna push in the wave, get priority. Blitzcrank not allowed to back here. Unfortunately Zilean once again gets hooked into the tower, gets tower shot, gets ignited, does not ult himself, and dies. So that's kind of what I was referring to. This guy is not even willing to ult himself. Can I actually trust him to ult me? I think not, right? But anyways, I'm able to secure the tower by myself. I believe that was first tower of the game. Either that or Jace got it, but either which way, I eventually get the tower. Look at this, right? That's the cancel on Blitzcrank hook, right? So if Blitzcrank hooks you and you E at the correct moment, the E will actually cancel the CC, which I think is really OP. But we are able to get the cancellation off, so Blitzcrank does not land the hook successfully. Now that could be the difference between life and death in a lot of situations. So Ezreal sometimes just gets that OP get out of jail free card with that E. And here, Senna and Blitzcrank are chasing me. Blitzcrank has the hook. I cleanse out. And first time I had to use cleanse this game, because normally I'm able to use the E to cancel. Didn't have E in that instance, so I had to cleanse away. Or rather, I got hooked, so I had to cleanse away. Well, I'm here, we're just trying to get the push in. Of course, they don't have a tower anymore. We can't do the long rundown if needed. Right, that's kind of what we're doing. Zilean, of course, ults himself, but of course they stop attacking Zilean since he is on his ult. And here, a little bit of a bait. Morgana now coming in from behind. Should be a free kill. Morgana picks up the kill. Amumu now coming in. Blitzcrank really low, trying his best to get out. Now, Lucian comes in from behind. And unfortunately, coming in from behind means that he's going to run into all of us. Does end up trading 1-for-1 though. Amumu now on the run. Missing the Q on him, unfortunately. He does leave that trail of, I think that's Sunfire Aegis. And here Blitzcrank coming in, gets the hook onto the Zilean once again. Zilean making no effort to dodge the hook this entire game. And unfortunately goes down. Morgana didn't have a black shield. And neither of us are gonna take the hook for him, I guess. So he ends up going down. And there I have a full charge mana mune already, a full charge mirror mana already. And only now am I starting to buy the Triforce components. Of course, the fully charged mirror mana is a really decent power spike for Ezreal. And the entire enemy team is grouping mid, right? So I kind of need to go mid to help defend the mid tower against them. And my whole team is now converging on mid as well. Of course, whole enemy team with the exception of Fiora. And it looks like if it's going to happen here, Jarvan is going in. We get an ulti off onto 2 people. Jarvan gets the ulti off as well. Trying to just reach the fight, the Rammus goes down, so does the Blitzcrank. And enemy team has clearly overextended way too far now. Lucian on the run. Jarvan as well as Morgana trying to finish him off. And here we see enemy jungle up, so we're going to steal enemy jungle. Now unfortunately, we're going to steal enemy jungle and Jarvan going to steal from us. Because he's the jungler and he's just going to smite it away. He actually missmited it with 13 health left, but we aren't able to secure it ourselves. So here we're slowly going to back off because we don't want to overextend. Speaking of overextend, Zilean overextends quite a bit. And Fiora is now on the chase. But now Fiora is the one that's overextended. Finds herself behind enemy lines. We get off a pretty good ult onto 2 people. And now it's Amumu coming in with the stun. We are going to QSS it out so that we can continue to DPS the entire enemy team. Jace picks up a triple and we pick up a double. And the whole enemy team is wiped. So enemy team just constantly taking bad fights. Now Zilean there, super overextended, but is able to escape and baits Fiora into overextending, and she baits her entire team to follow her, and it's just a series of unfortunate events by the enemy team, so just really not that great. And now we're able to complete our Triforce, and we're of course on the major 2-item power spike. Now of course Ezreal peaks in the mid game on these 2 items, and I say that because obviously with every subsequent item he does get stronger, but what I'm trying to say is that other champions on 3 items are stronger than him, or 4 items, like assuming you have equal number of items, will be stronger than him. But on 2 items he's stronger than most champions, right? Because he's really a 2-item ADC who spikes in the mid game, and this is where you kind of really need to take advantage of your strength to kind of take over the game. Now arguably we kind of already have, right? Because we're actually 9k gold, and highest goal on the enemy team is Senna with like 7k gold now, so we're 2k gold ahead of the enemy ADC, who's the most fed member. And we're of course dealing a very good amount of damage to the enemy team. You can see we're just in the backline safely DPSing, even just Eing forward just to get in range to deal more damage to more people. Jarvan's gonna finish Senna off. Amumu runs for the hills. Blitzcrank also running for the hills. Don't think he's gonna get out. He actually does get out. No, he doesn't. Amumu now running for the hill. Unfortunately, Jarvan dies, so we cannot pursue him any further. Jace kind of trolling a little bit, taking tower shots, playing a little bit too aggressive. Now here, Nexus shield unfortunately a little bit too big, a bit difficult to end. Now Fiora is taking a bunch of damage. Is able to repulse majority of it, and I don't hit the ulti here, so unfortunately she is going to escape. And Morgana tanks 1 tower shot too many, and she dies. So unfortunately we're throwing the game just a little bit here. So we're gonna have to kind of cool our jets and back on off a little bit. Now I see enemy blue buff up, Dragon's up as well. But my team has 3 people dead and enemy team is all alive. So the best thing I can do here, I think, is to steal the enemy jungle before they are aware of it, and then go ahead and start the dragon. Now I can't really, of course, start the Baron or anything like that, so the best thing I can do is to just start the dragon, wait for my team to kind of come over. If the enemy team all collapse on me, I'm going to have to run, but thankfully it appears the enemy team's a little bit disorganized and they're not trying to collapse. Right, so here we're going to secure the dragon, no biggie. And now I'm thinking we should just go to the Baron, right? But Jarvan has other ideas. He goes in, manages to get a nice 2-man ulti, which allows me to get an ulti myself. And we're able to actually get a pick onto Senna. Now, if we can get a pick onto Amumu, it's going to be a pretty free Baron without the enemy jungler. However, Lucian is laying down some cover fire for Amumu to escape. Jarvan now going all the way in. And we get off pretty good poke. And Fiora is now running from Jace. But she's going to get cut off by us. He eats a Q to the face and then an E auto for the kill. And now Baron looks like a very, very good idea. However, just as I'm about to start it, I see Zilean in trouble. So I'm helping him out a little bit by just laying down some cover fire to discourage the chase. Amumu and Blitzcrank are not discouraged at all. Does chase all the way onto the Zilean. Zilean, however, has ulti, so he's going to survive. Now I'm getting caught by Amumu. I have to cleanse out. And I take a little bit of an aggressive E, which I shouldn't have, but somehow I'm not punished, and I actually managed to flash out and survive. Now, honestly, I think I deserve to die there, but somehow I survived. Jace actually picks up a quadra kill. And in this game, I actually choose to go for Riftmaker instead of the other 2 options. Now, Riftmaker is my personal favorite 3rd item option, but I think there's a pretty good argument that going one of the tank busting options in this game is pretty good, considering there is Amumu and Blitzcrank on the front lines. And now my team here destroys the top lane inhibitor. Fiora, once again, last person left defending the tower, out for the wave clear. And I think we can just end the game at this point, just DPSing onto the Nexus. Now here, I think that if we really wanted to, we could have just focused the Nexus and ended the game. However, we're having a little bit too much fun, and entire enemy team respawns, and we get the kill on Amumu. However, we're getting knocked up CC by Blitzcrank. We fail the E over the wall. We E into the wall instead. We're getting completely caught out and we're going to be going down. Unfortunately, right as we're about to win the game, we kind of throw the game a little bit. Jarvan, however, is not going to be throwing the game. He's going to be able to kill the Senna with the revive coming in from the Zilean. Blitzcrank hooks a minion instead of him, and Jarvan having none of it, just going to end the game. And there we have it. We do end up picking up the victory in this game. So I'm going to leave you guys with the stats as usual. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and goodbye.